Thanks so much for joining me. It is still pouring rain out there across much of Alberta, including here in downtown Calgary. This is what I call my flood puddle. It's near our building, and it really fills up once you get about 5 millimeters of rain. We've certainly had a lot more than that with this event. Rainfall warnings still persisting across southern, central, and portions of northeastern Alberta for that 50 to 100 millimeter plus rain that we're expecting. Slightly less amounts here to the west, but still substantial. Special weather statement for southeast BC and along the central Alberta foothills. But you head out to the Rocky Mountains. Anyone down for some skiing? This is up at Sunshine on Monday afternoon. A lot of that precipitation falling as snow because it's so cold up there in the Alpine. Not totally unusual for these cold rain events at this time of the year, but look at all that white gold up there. This is actually one of the reasons why we're not seeing more runoff into our rivers and flood potential downstream, because this is slow release water. And it's just locking up a lot of that water instead of having it run off, much like the 2013 event, which had warm rain up to the summits of the peaks, lots of runoff, the contribution from heavy rain, as well as the meltwater flowing into the basins and flooding downstream. This is a lot unlike that event. So lots of good snow out there in the Rockies with this. However, we're still seeing those rivers responding to the heavy precipitation across the province. Areas like the North Saskatchewan River Basin, the Battle River, and along the foothills to the south, get into southern Alberta. The Bow River, east of the confluence with the Highwood River, and the Oldman and the South Saskatchewan through Lethbridge and Medicine Hat, even our parched Milk River Basin, all seeing high stream flow advisories. And of course, we still see that flood watch in the Lake Louise area. That was from earlier this week with the warm temperatures melting that snowpack. So again, high stream flow advisories doesn't mean we're seeing or expecting flood conditions along these rivers. But we're seeing fairly rapid rises in some of them, up to a meter in some cases, especially those larger rivers. Not a good time to be out on the water. But in general, this is likely going to be a beneficial rain event. We're already hearing lots of folks talking about how this is like $1 million rain in southern Alberta. It's been years since we've seen a storm system of this sort of scale bringing this much rain to so much of the province. So it's really good to see for many folks how much rain is coming with this event. As of this morning, this is a precipitation total map from 7 o'clock this morning. So we're now into Monday evening. We've seen a lot more rain than this, but we can kind of get a sense for where the heavier totals are probably going to end up by the end of this storm. East, northeast of Edmonton, and southwest of Calgary along the foothills is where we're seeing those kind of big bullseyes of heaviest precipitation. I checked those gauges, a bunch of gauges across Alberta recently, and we're already seeing many sites approaching 100 millimeters in portions of southwestern Alberta along the foothills, a couple here in northeastern Alberta too. So, by the end of this event, we're still probably going to see that advertised 70, 80 millimeters plus for a large area of Alberta. In between here, Calgary and Edmonton and east of Calgary, notice that our totals this morning were being reported to be a little bit less. I have a theory. I think that we're actually underestimating or underreporting the amount of rain that's falling in that area due to the winds. If you live in the area, it's just been really relentless strong wind here. This is Alberta, and this is a weather model showing winds a few hundred meters above the ground. And you can see here very strong winds blowing through the region. In Calgary, we've been reporting winds, like I say, 40, 50, gusting to 70 kilometers an hour. What this can do is cause a lot of turbulence over the top of these exposed rain gauges and actually prevent a lot of the rainwater from entering the gauge, such that we actually underestimate the amount of true rain that has fallen, sometimes 20, 30%. So that's what we call undercatch, and that can be a factor. That may be a factor in why we're seeing some of those areas reporting a little bit less. For anyone who's interested in undercatch and tipping bucket rain gauges in general, here's an interesting paper from Ruth Dunn et al. We can also look at CoCoRaHS. They've got their own, it's basically a volunteer network of observers who go out there and measure the rainfall. They've got rain gauges. Many of these gauges reporting 40, 50 millimeters plus as of earlier this morning. So again, lots more rain since. We're going to see a lot of rain by the end of this storm. Anyone can join CoCoRaHS. That's the Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network. If you're interested in this citizen science objective, we would love it. You can never have too many weather observations. All that's asked is that you get this specific 4-inch diameter rain gauge, and you get the training that they put you through to kind of standardize the process. And your reports can be very high quality. They can contribute to citizen science, to the meteorological community at large. It's very useful. So sign up for CoCoRaHS if you already like putting up a rain gauge in your backyard. Certainly something to consider. This rain is going to persist through into Tuesday. And actually looks like we're probably going to get one more significant slug of rain across much of central and southern Alberta through Monday night and into early Tuesday morning before it finally starts to taper off Tuesday. And, we see those winds finally dying down into Tuesday as well. The system is going to move eastward across the prairies through midweek, bringing not nearly as much rain as Alberta saw, but still beneficial rainfall across much of central, southeast Saskatchewan, central southern Manitoba, and northwestern Ontario. So, especially following that extreme heat, that's going to be welcome precipitation. We may end up with, 20, 30 millimeters of rain in many areas across the eastern parts of the prairie. So again, largely beneficial rain. This is critical to really start our sort of prairie hydrological cycle, our land atmospheric feedback process. Let me break it down a little bit here. Once you get the rain in the ground, especially in the early part of the summer, this is what we call our June monsoon because it's our wet time of the year here. If we get our seasonal rainfall across much of Western Canada, especially the prairie provinces, we can kind of kickstart that. Farmers call it priming the pump. You kickstart that water moisture recycling process. You get the rains that fall down on the ground, they percolate down into the soils. You get down into the root zone. Those crops, as they're maturing, they transpire that moisture back up into the atmosphere, goes up into the sky, theoretically produces clouds, thunderstorms, and more rain. And this is very, very important rain. In fact, 50% or more of our annual average precipitation across much of the prairies comes from thunderstorms in the summer. So if you miss out on that rain, that's when drought can rapidly set in. So it really helps to get these early sort of large-scale rain events going, to get the moisture in the ground and to get that moisture back up into the atmosphere to kind of kickstart this process. Again, farmers call it priming the pump. That's exactly what it's like. This is a photo I took over a flowering canola field in July in Alberta. We see that kind of correlation of the peak severity of thunderstorm season as well with, flowering crops, maturing crops. Barley, wheat, canola, these are giving off lots of water vapor in the summer when conditions are right, and they fuel thunderstorms. So again, they fuel storms that can actually contribute to severe weather, but in many cases, these thunderstorms bring beneficial rains as well. As long as you don't get hailed out or you get a tornado on your property, this is generally beneficial precipitation. Again, I'm talking about June being the June monsoon. Again, the word monsoon, it tends to be it doesn't have anything really to do with rain per se. It just has to do with a seasonal wind shift. Like if we think of the Indian subcontinent, it gets really hot in the springtime and it causes low pressure on land, causes a flow of moist air off the warmer Indian Ocean, and then that's when your rain starts. So it's associated, that wind shift is associated with seasonal rainfall. Not the same here in the Canadian prairies. It just is our seasonal wet season. And so Calgary, we average 112.7 millimeters of rain in June. That's a lot of rain. This is based on the 1991 to 2020 average. May, a lot less at 61 millimeters. But if we look at what we actually got in May, we ended up with 21. So, 22 there. So it's like 1/3 of our average May. So, this storm is going to make up the rest of May and part of June. But it just gives you a sense of how much more rain we need to really even just stay average and maintain our average moisture levels. We don't want it right away, but let this event drain. But then in a few weeks, we're going to want more rain to kind of get our average precipitation. And again, given the long-term drought across the landscape, we could benefit from several wetter than normal years across much of the Canadian prairies. Edmonton's peak wet season, the wettest month there is July. June, still very wet though. And again, a lot of this is from thunderstorms. Some of this is from these large-scale rain events. We call them stratiform rain events. But a lot of this also comes from thunderstorm rains in the summertime. But you get into Saskatchewan, Saskatoon, and Regina, peak, the wettest month is June, much like Calgary. It looks very similar to Calgary there in Saskatoon and Regina. You get into Winnipeg, it's a little bit more kind of uniform. From May through August, that's your wet season. A lot of this also from thunderstorm rains there. You get out into the BC interior, of course, Kamloops a lot drier. It's kind of deserty there in Kamloops, east of the Coast Mountains. But June is also the wettest month in the BC interior. It's important that we get these rains through this season as well to stave off those early severe wildfire seasons. And of course, especially important this year because we've got ongoing drought in southern and central BC interior. And if we don't get this seasonal rain through June, our so-called June monsoon, we're going to be off to the races potentially for a significantly a bad fire season in BC. So hopefully that doesn't happen. You go to the BC coast though, completely different. This is kind of the opposite here in Vancouver. Just for fun here, this is a temperate oceanic climate, but it looks a lot more like a Mediterranean climate because we've got like the wet winter months and the dry, pleasant summer months. If you've been to Vancouver in summer, it's a wonderful time to visit, but completely opposite from the prairies. You know, this is our wet season in the prairies, completely opposite out there on the BC coast. Rounding out this discussion, we're going to talk about the heat and how it's kind of contributed to fire danger in recent days. I mean, we had record-breaking heat for several days, mid-30s temperatures. I think our peak temperature in Alberta, Medicine Hat, hit 34.9. Nipawin, Saskatchewan, I believe, it hit 37.6. And Dauphin, Manitoba, hit 37.4. So we got really hot with this event. Of course, hot, dry, windy weather fuels fire danger, and we did see some fires really take off with this event. Particularly here, the Lobstick Fire southwest of Prince Albert, and the Cayford Fire out a little further east near Hudson Bay, Saskatchewan. These grew fairly substantially with those hot, dry, windy conditions. Also a few more fires out east, as we expected might happen across Manitoba and northern Ontario. Still a few fires burning back here in Alberta. But again, this area just got soaked. But I mean, that fire southwest of Prince Albert really exploded the other day. This is a tweet from Chris Stammers, who took a picture of, I guess this is a picture of a webcam, a highway cam, looking toward this smoke plume. It exploded. In fact, this is what's called a pyrocumulonimbus cloud. It's a fire-generated thunderstorm, and the fire is so intense and it develops in an environment that's favorable at the same time for thunderstorms. You can get these pyro CBs, and they can actually produce lightning, rain, even hail. We did see lightning produced with this pyro CB here in near southwest of Prince Albert. So if you live in central Saskatchewan, you probably saw some fairly ominous looking smoke plumes and perhaps had some reductions to air quality there. Temperatures the rest of this week across the country, or across in particular Western Canada here. BC, you're going to cool off. In the BC interior, your general cooling trend through this week. Alberta, we're cool now, and we're going to rebound to more seasonal or near seasonal, maybe even above seasonal temperatures through the end of the week. Although still, albeit somewhat unsettled. Again, we're getting that moisture in the ground. If the air's unstable, we can get these thunderstorms with daytime heating. Eastern prairies, like I say, you're going to get that little system that moves through midweek. You'll get a little bit of relief from the heat. Those heat warnings probably will be dropped, but it's going to be summery again as we get toward the weekend. That heat returning to the eastern prairies. So again, of course, that how our fire danger is going to respond. Very cool here, where the rain event is ongoing. Still hot here in the eastern prairies, but as we progress through the week, there, eastern prairies is going to begin to cool off. As that rain moves across the prairie provinces, but as we see the return of the hot weather as we get toward late week, the fire danger will start to increase again across parts of the eastern prairies. Staying cooler in BC and in Alberta for the time being, though. Thanks so much for joining me. We'll talk to you next time. And next video, I think I'm going to make one on El Nino and the potential development of what's being called the Super El Nino and how that might affect our weather this summer, fall, and winter. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for joining. We'll talk to you next time.